Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into the multifaceted, and let's be honest, often controversial, evolution of Bill Gates. We're going to trace his monumental ripple effect across the globe, from those wild early days of the microcomputer revolution right up to his current status as one of the most influential private citizens on Earth. If you want to understand the actual mechanics of modern global power, you absolutely have to start here. So here is our roadmap for today. First, the boy who built Microsoft. Then, from monopolist to philanthropist. Next, fighting global disease, followed by investing in climate solutions, and finally, the power and scrutiny. Let's dive right in. Part 1. The boy who built Microsoft. Growing up in Seattle, Gates had this incredibly fierce competitive streak. I mean, whether his family was playing a casual game of hearts or just some pickleball, there was always a reward for winning and a strict penalty for losing. That intense drive really kicked into high gear in 1968 when his school bought time on a teletype terminal. Gates got so obsessed he actually got banned from a local computer center for exploiting bugs to get free screen time, a true hacker from day one. But look at the staggering speed of his rise from that high school ban. He drops out of Harvard in '75, secures this massive IBM partnership by 1980 by cleverly retaining the copyright to the operating system, launches Windows in '85, and boom, by 1987, at just 31 years old, he becomes the youngest billionaire in the entire world. Just look at the sheer audacity of this quote about his decision to leave Harvard. When Gates and his childhood friend Paul Allen first contacted MIT's in 1975 offering software for their brand new Altair computer, they didn't even own the machine. Actually, scratch that. They hadn't even written a single line of code yet. They basically just built an emulator, coded a basic interpreter over a few weeks of completely sleepless nights, and successfully pitched it. He wasn't just taking a wild risk here, he was quite literally engineering his own reality, selling a product that did not exist until the exact moment he proved it could work. Moving on to part 2, from monopolist to philanthropist. We're really looking at a tale of two entirely different extremes here. On one side, you have the ruthless chief executive of the 1990s. This was an era where Microsoft's notoriously aggressive business tactics to secure monopolies led to massive antitrust litigation and these really fierce battles with the FTC. But then, right around the year 2000, he makes this unprecedented transition. Influenced by historic philanthropists like John D. Rockefeller, he created his foundation. By 2008, he had fully stepped down from Microsoft's day-to-day operations to dedicate his life and his massive fortune to giving his wealth away. And the sheer scale of that pivot really comes down to this one massive number, $100 billion. To put that into perspective, that is more than the entire GDP of many countries around the world, given away by one single person. That represents his total lifetime charitable donations so far, with a staggering $60 billion of that going directly to the Gates Foundation. It is, without a doubt, one of the largest transfers of private wealth into the public sphere in human history. Which brings us to part 3, fighting global disease and poverty. He essentially took that intense, highly analytical systems engineering brain of his and pointed it squarely at infectious disease and poverty. And their targets are monumental. They aren't just funding local clinics. They are actively attempting to eradicate polio entirely from the face of the earth. They're funding cutting-edge agricultural science like golden rice. This is the concept of literally engineering nature, modifying crops to include crucial nutrients to combat vitamin A deficiency and prevent childhood blindness. And, of course, during the global pandemic, they rapidly set up the COVID-19 Therapeutics Accelerator to fast-track life-saving new drugs. Now, why does this matter so much? Because this is not a government agency. This is a private entity that commands the financial resources of a small nation, sitting on assets valued well over $34 billion. This massive war chest is what allows Gates to shape public health policy on a planetary scale. World leaders listen to him because he brings nation-state levels of funding to the table, which gives him a vast amount of unelected power to set the stage for major global shifts. All right, part 4, investing in climate solutions. His playbook here brilliantly mirrors his early tech days. He isn't just planting trees. He is funding financially risky, deeply technical private sector innovations. Take TerraPower, for example. He co-founded it to build next-generation sodium nuclear reactors, and they have a massive project underway right now in Wyoming. It's a hugely expensive, high-risk bet on redefining nuclear safety. But if it works, it could completely revolutionize the energy grid. He's also backing carbon removal tech, pouring money into synthetic meat to cut down agricultural emissions, and he actively lobbied lawmakers to help pass monumental legislation like the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act. This quote really hits the nail on the head regarding his worldview. If you gave me the choice between picking the next 10 presidents or ensuring that energy is environmentally friendly and a quarter as costly, I'd pick the energy thing. For him, traditional politics is entirely secondary to technology. He firmly believes that massive technological innovation and clean, reliable energy is the ultimate lever for human progress, and basically the only real way to stabilize both greenhouse gas emissions and global poverty at the very same time. And finally, Part 5, the power and the scrutiny. Now, obviously, wielding this much unelected power doesn't happen in a vacuum. Let's look impartially at the pushback, starting with the environmental activist community. While Gates is pouring billions into climate tech, parts of that community are highly critical of his approach, labeling it as technological solutionism. So what exactly does that mean? Basically, technological solutionism is the belief that complex social problems can be fixed just by inventing new gadgets or systems, rather than actually changing society or politics. In other words, critics argue his investments in synthetic beef or carbon capture just treat the symptoms with technology, while completely ignoring the much deeper systemic issues in global politics, corporate behavior, and human overconsumption. Let's neutrally break down 3 of the biggest controversies surrounding his modern power. First, during the pandemic, Gates opposed opening up vaccine patents to the world, a mechanism known as a TRIPS waiver. Critics argued this protected pharma monopolies at the expense of poorer nations. Gates, however, countered that the real bottlenecks were manufacturing safety and facility capabilities, not the patents themselves. Next up, media funding. Investigative journalists have heavily scrutinized the millions he gives to media outlets and NGOs, arguing that it shapes favorable coverage and allows him to direct global health policy without actually having any formal medical credentials. And finally, agriculture. Through his investment firm, Gates is the largest private owner of farmland in the United States, holding 242,000 acres. For many, this represents a highly uncomfortable, unprecedented concentration of vital land and resources by a single private citizen. So, distilling the math and magnitude of this one life really leaves us pondering a profound structural question. We have a man who accelerated the computing revolution, amassed unimaginable wealth, and is now deploying it to entirely rewire global health and energy systems. But when one private citizen operates on the scale of a sovereign nation, accountable primarily to himself and his board, who really decides the future of our planet? It's a huge question that will define the intersection of wealth, technology, and global power for decades to come. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.